Okay. But I don't see that as the first slide.
Okay. I've only been in Canada for 6 years. Before that, I lived in Africa and India. In Africa and India, when you say you're starting a program at 5 p.m., you may end up starting at about 6:30. But I'm learning to be Canadian. I'm learning to keep time. So we're not doing bad. 8 minutes past 5, not bad. By Canadian standards, not bad. Okay? So, so my name is Philip Omondi, originally from Kenya, via India, and then back to Africa, and then Canada. So, very happy to have you in Beth, Emmanuel. I'm the new pastor in this place. We have a young congregation with about 80 people, about 25 or 27 children, 13 and below, in that number. So we are a young church. Just so excited to be in Beth Emmanuel. It has a rich history of the impact it had in the community, and that's what we're trying to revive. We're trying to engage with our community in very positive ways. So when I was approached to host this at Beth Emmanuel, I said, why not? This is home. Come on in. So we are happy to have everybody, and I'm here to say, in Swahili we say, karibu sana. In English we say, welcome. Yeah. So welcome everybody. I'll hand it over to the Britton. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. So my name is Brattonsville, and I've only been in Canada for 48 hours. But I felt very welcome. About 4 years ago, maybe 5, somewhere in that range, I got a phone call from my cousin Susan, who is not with us, but 2 of her sisters are. I've known my entire life that I am descended from plantation owners, enslavers. I got this phone call from Susan, who lives near me. I see her fairly often, so all right, Susan's calling. I picked up the phone. She said, "I've got a question for you." Generally, when you preface a conversation by saying, "I have a question for you," it's not an innocuous question. So she said, "I was contacted by someone who is a descendant of the people who were enslaved on the plantation, and she would like to have a meeting between white and black descendants of the plantation. Are you interested in participating?" And I said, "Yes, that sounds really interesting, really intriguing." So we did. That was several years ago. We have met online once a month since then. We have met in person a couple of times a year at Brattonsville, the plantation that we're all descended from. We have traveled together a couple of times. It's been fantastic, and it has enriched my life in ways that I never anticipated it would from that one simple phone call. Another thing that I started doing was delving very deeply into my family history. So I read a book, and I'd known that my great-great-grandfather came to London in 1871 to avoid being arrested and charged with crimes that he committed in the United States. I started digging more and more into that family history. I read a book about his time here. I got in touch with the author of the book. That led me to another person. From there, I'm in touch with James Rainey. I'm in touch with Chip Martin. I'm in touch with Carl Cadogan. And initially, the email that I said was, "We're interested in coming up. We're hoping someone could give us a few pointers on where to go." And it blossomed into something more than that, which was fantastic. So we had a lot of help from local people who have made us feel ridiculously welcome, more so than I would have ever hoped. One of whom is our next person who's going to come up here, and that was who helped me get the ball rolling on this. So James, I appreciate that, and please come and tell us what you know.
Thank you, Philip, and thank you,
Bratton. I'm working, I'll experiment a little bit with this. Is this, I was trying to put my music, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, but if it's things I know, I can stop right now because the really knowledgeable people are coming on. But one thing I wanted to say is, perhaps even without realizing it, we've been holding space for this weekend in London and in Brattonsville and elsewhere, probably since about 1872. And now this afternoon, our hearts are full. I'm James Turvey, and I'm the president of the London and Middlesex Historical Society, and it's a great honor to be part of this uplifting weekend. Bratton talked about the situation this last October, but the journey to this weekend began in the London of the 1870s when fugitive Klansman James Rufus Bratton was a very well-respected figure in London. He returned to the American South after a series of fond farewells, including one in October 1878. This weekend's October Bratton event is a welcome to his descendants. And I'd ask you right now to welcome our guests who've come up, traveled a long way to be with us, and to hear that Londoners have welcomed you touches me so much. That's fantastic. Please, a round of applause. And I think let's go to the next slide. And this is the email that started the process for Bratton. And I didn't know who Ron Shaw was, and I didn't know about his book. But I want to thank Ron Shaw because he really helped make the connections that led to this. A year earlier, Brian Martin, and it's hard for me not to call him Chip because we were together for many years in the Free Press, but he'd given an excellent talk to the Historical Society on his Bratton-themed book, From Underground Railroad to Rebel Refuge, Canada and the Civil War, and that was in October 2023. And as Bratton has said, Chip was very soon in touch, and Chip has been putting in, I don't even know if you're on Fitbit or anything, Chip, but I marvel at your ability to walk and talk with great detail at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, I know. And I mean that, but with great detail, I said, with great detail.
That's true.
But that's got rolling, and it's led to this. Let's have the next slide again. Now, this is London in 1872, and if someone had one of those laser pointers, they could probably show where we are. But the population was apparently about 20,000 then. The Historical Society, by the way, did have some previous history with James Rufus Bratton. In November 1942, its meeting had two of its icons, and these are famous names in London history making, Fred Landon and Alice McFarland. They told the tale in a tone favoring James Rufus Bratton. Now, Mary Overholt, who witnessed the rendition, to use Ron Shaw's term, abduction is used, sometimes kidnapping, but attempt to bring him to justice is in there too, was an 8-year-old in 1872, and she was at that meeting. She was Alice McFarland's aunt and was at that meeting, and Alice McFarland had talked to her about it.
James, we've had a request to put the mic a little closer.
Oh, we have a request to put it-
Thank you very much.
All right, well, it's okay, we'll do that. If you want me to read, should I repeat? No, I just...
Yeah, from the beginning.
Yeah, that's right. And Chip can walk and talk at the same time, but he walks and talks with great details. But the representation matters, and it was terrific when the London Black Heritage Council's Carl Cadogan and Christina Lord joined this project. Much of what has been powerful and authentic about the weekend, two-sided paper, the welcome, including reaching out to Pastor Philip for use of this church, has been led by the London Black Heritage Council. Now let's switch over to that slide of the train. Because who would want to be on a beautiful little train going into London, Ontario? What else was going on in London during those 7 or so years that James Rufus Bratton was in London? Let's get on the train and find out. I'm going to, real quick, I'm going to talk quickly about 3 icons. The first, one person, this man, Richard Morris Buck, and then 2 landmarks. This is Richard Morris Buck. To me, he was the outstanding Londoner of the era. The writer of Cosmic Consciousness, the owner of the first telephone in London. He was also the friend and literary executor of Walt Whitman, the great American poet who visited the Forest City. We'll try the next slide. hard to make believe that is me. That's fanboy me, trying to find Buck's origin story. We were seeking Creek Farm, which was the farm he grew up on, fairly near where the asylum was. And like a lot of things in London, you go searching for history, and it turns out to be somewhere beneath a drugstore parking lot. And I think Chip gave us a warning. I mean, we saw a beautiful man go home this morning. It's going to be, as we heard, turned into a parking garage. That's not what this should be about. Still, Buck lives in the constant consciousness of many of us. And there's the next slide. Even if the formidable-looking asylum is long gone. And here's time for another slide. And this is the beautiful Blackfriars Bridge. Came along. And I think there may be somebody here who knows everything about the Blackfriars Bridge. Is that true? I won't say any more about it, but oh, I thought that was so, yes. I'll stop there, but it's still here. It's been beautifully refurbished by the city. It doesn't look like this so much anymore, but it's still very much lovingly restored. All right, on to the next slide. And this again, I know Chip knows much more about this than I do, but this is Tecumseh Park and a ball game from 1877, the Tecumseh's championship season. And the ballpark, again, because of civic engagement, I've complained about parking garages and parking lots, but to be fair, the city also, and many of us collectively, put a lot of energy into restoring Tecumseh Park now, that park, and it's still working.
And it's the oldest baseball park in the world.
And it's the oldest baseball park in the world.
I can sit and talk at the same time as well.
It's the oldest continuously operating.
The oldest we have footnotes with our footnotes, but thank you. That's a remarkable thing we have right in the heart of London. And thanks again to people like Chip and others. But thank you. It's old. It's there. We love it. All right. Now I think we're getting to another page. Oh, sorry about it. Now, I don't know if this next one will work. Okay, we have the slide. Does anyone here know how to sing The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down? Does anyone want to sing?
By that mostly Canadian band, the band.
Yes. And of course, one of the reasons I was looking around for music, we're in an incredibly musical neighborhood. The Lombardos were near here. Joey Hollingsworth, whose picture you saw at Museum London, many of us grew up near here. The Ball Family Jubilee Band, which I know the Western Public History Field program is very familiar with, was also from right around here, and many others. Garner Brooks, great opera singer who started out singing opera and requests over his father's gas station on Horton. They're all from this area, so I wanted some music in this, and I also thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could find a plaintive song about the post-Civil War? And I thought, well, of course, we've got this song by the band, and how many members of the band were Londoners or very close to London? I count 4 of the 5, I think. So the band that invented Americana is basically all London region, almost all London region with some significant assistance. It's a song that's presumably set somewhere in the year of the Brattonsville in London era in the 1870s, somewhere in that. It doesn't give a year, but it's something like that. And now we're with a group of people who have ties to that Brattonsville story, but that story, their presence here raises us up. It doesn't drag over, it raises us up. And they're far better heroes, I would say, than in the 1870s origin story. Now the Descendants are here, and we welcome them. And to continue, I'm going to turn over to Carla Cadone.
Thank you very much, James. Candace isn't here today, but she's one of the descendants that facilitated and coordinated a lot of what you're seeing here today. So I'd like to thank her for doing this. And I really didn't want to say a whole lot, but I have a few slides. And I thought I would, go ahead.
There they are.
Oh, that's his slide. That's okay.
I'll just say Garth Hudson is second from right or fourth from left. He's the one from London.
Stratford.
Sorry, there we are.
So as James says, James contacted us a number of months ago, and we had a discussion about getting involved in this project. It was one of those things that the history of James Rufus Bratton isn't as well known as the people in this room knows. And London Black Heritage Council, really, we're looking to preserve Black history, looking to elevate people's understanding, and we wanted to make sure that what we are doing and what they were discussing would make sense to us. So, next slide. Next slide. So we are an organization that's been around for almost 25 years. We started out as London Black History Coordinating Committee, and the first number of years we were focused on just Black History Month events, trying to educate the general community about what we do, the history of Black people in London and also in Canada. And so, you can see our mission statement is really looking at collaborating with other organizations. So we don't try to do everything ourselves. And getting involved in this project was a really good opportunity to collaborate with James and his team. Next slide. Go ahead. Next slide. This is a bit of a definition of Black history. I won't read it to you, but I think about 15 years ago, we were having discussions about what does Black history mean? And what does it mean in the context of Canada? I think sometimes when people think of Black history, they think of American Black history. And we wanted to ensure that people understand that there is a long history of Black presence in Canada. So we came up with this sort of definition because there are people here who came here differently. I think people understand those that came through the Underground Railroad, freedom seekers, but the people who also came as part of the loyalists that fought in Revolutionary War. They came from the Caribbean, they came from other places, and then later they came from Africa and South America. So we have a very diverse group and diverse history in London and in Canada. Go ahead, next. This talks a little bit about that. Next slide. Next slide. One of the projects we've been working on, and I think that folks had an opportunity to see and visit Fanshawe Penner Village yesterday, and to see the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the sister church to this church. When we were looking for a venue for tonight, I had the opportunity to meet Pastor Philip, and he very quickly said, yes, you can use this space. And it seems so appropriate for all the work that we've been doing and we have done over the years. So that church was built in 1848 and really was a meeting place, worship space for the Black community. And when the community outgrew that space, they built this space. So as you came into the building, you would notice that there's a heritage sign on this building. It's a heritage building. I think someone said that London doesn't treasure their heritage buildings as much as they should, but there are people like Janae and other folks who have done incredible work to save not only the AME Church, but other buildings in the city. So hats off to those people who made that effort.
Good evening, everyone. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Good. Okay. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank everyone from London, Ontario for making us feel 1,000% at home. You all have been wonderful to us from the very first email, and we really do appreciate you. Okay. And let's give them a hand. That's a prayer. So I want to give you a 10-minute history of a 200-plus-year-old story about historic Brattonsville. So this is my great-great-grandfather. His name was Green Bratton. He was born around 1838, but I don't have an exact year because, as you know, enslaved people were not given birth certificates. Oftentimes their names were written down anywhere since they were considered property. But he is a great-grandfather of myself, my cousin Angela, who's here, wave your hand, my cousin Linda in the back, raise your hand, and the great-great-great-grandfather of my cousin Charnel, raise your hand. And he died around 1917. So we have some records, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the records that we have. We have an amazing collection of records which are almost unheard of in the African American community, the amount and the number of records that we have. Okay, next slide. This is historic Brattonsville. Historic Brattonsville is, if you ever find yourself in Charlotte, North Carolina, please come to historic Brattonsville. You give us a little notice, we'll meet you there and give you a very, very special tour. But it is, it's over 30 historic structures, and it tells the story of, it has importance in African American, in American history, I should say, in American history, from the Revolutionary War up really until the 1940s. Brattonsville was a center of the community. And there are a couple of pictures there. So every day, 363 days a year, there are interpreters at historic Brattonsville, African American and white, that tell you the story of enslavement and other aspects of American and African American history on the plantation. So, this is my favorite place in the world. It's better than Disneyland. I'm boycotting Florida, so anyway, it's better than Disneyland. But it is the South Caroliniana Library. South Caroliniana Library is the home of the Bratton family papers. And those papers start from when Colonel William Bratton purchased the land from the Catawba Nation all the way up. The latest record is actually in the 1980s, but most of the records are from the era of enslavement. Now, just to give you an idea about how relevant these records are, do you all know the historian, African-American historian, John Hope Franklin? I heard that name. Anyway, he's one of the most noted African-American historians ever. And I read a piece from him, and Dr. Franklin says, I found 2 purchases of enslaved Africans at this particular plantation he was studying. I said, 2? You know, that's kind of child's play. Because we have several, I don't know how many purchases might there have been. I don't know, I've seen maybe 30 or 40 of enslaved Africans at Brattonsville. The collection I think is a complete collection. Next slide, and I'll tell you why I say that. Because they kept the receipt written on the back of a corn shuck. So my philosophy is if you kept the receipt written on the back of a corn shuck, you saved everything else. So in those records are so many aspects of enslavement that I didn't know existed. My master's and PhD are in African American Studies. And there was so much that I found in the Bratton family papers. For example, the sharecropping contract. Well, my great-great-grandfather was freed by the 13th Amendment, not the Emancipation Proclamation, but by the 13th Amendment is what freed African Americans from enslavement. And he decided to stay on the plantation for whatever reason. And so he signed a sharecropping agreement, and he signed it with an X. And that is the document that I go back to, no matter how many times I see it. I've got a copy of it, it's in my book that I'm working on. And no matter, I just have to see that document and commune with that document and try to think, wow, when he made his X here, was one of the first decisions he made as a free man, to stay on the plantation or not stay on the plantation. He was about 30, 40 years old when he was free. And there are other documents, for example, a man who was free in 1824 borrowed some money from John Bratton, couldn't pay it back, and bound himself over as a slave until he could pay the money back. So there are so many, it's just a rich, rich treasury of documents, even passes. Give Green Bratton 1 bushel of potatoes. You know, there's just so much. And you haven't lived until you have seen your great-great-grandmother in a prenuptial agreement. Who knew they had prenuptial agreements in the 1800s? I didn't know that. So she's listed in the prenuptial agreement as the property of Mary Caroline Bratton. And it's like 3 legal pages long. What happens if Mary Caroline dies before she has children? What happens if her husband died? And what that, I mean, it's a whole long, list of the eventualities. And my great-grandmother at the age of 14 is listed in her prenuptial agreement. So I could go on and on about some of the documents that are there, but suffice it to say that it is an amazing collection. So that, in addition to having a plantation standing, in addition to connecting with the white descendants, in addition to the other part, oh, I gotta say that. I'm gonna tell you, hold that thought. I'm gonna come to that. Okay, let's go on. Next slide. This, right? All right, Nancy, wave your hand, Nancy. This is my cousin Nancy, to whom I am blood related. Now, we always thought that there was a blood connection, but you never know. So people say to me, well, you're light-skinned and your last name is Bratton, so you must be related to them. No, all right? Black women's bodies were so devalued. We had no say-so over what transpired, right? And so Green Bratton's or Melinda Bratton's father could have been anybody. Could have been some white man riding by on a horse. Could have been anybody. So you can't make that connection and say, well, just because you look a certain way and just because your last name is Bratton, that there is a blood connection. He also may not have been a child of the plantation. They might have bought him when he was a child, bought him when he was a grown man, bought her at any point. So we didn't know this until we matched DNA. And once we matched DNA, then it was solidified. Timeline. I guess it was for years, I have been trying to ask the staff and management of Brattonsville to help me connect with the white descendants. Why? Because I wanted to have a conversation. We have a shared history. So they dragged their feet on it. They didn't help me for over a year. I don't know how long it was, but it was over a year. And I know they thought that the meeting would get contentious and people would be fighting and arguing. I said, look, I'm not interested in that. I don't have that kind of time. I'm not interested in that. I said, I want to have a conversation. Finally, they helped me and I got connected with Nancy and Bratton, Susan, Sarah, Catherine, I'm not missing anybody who's here. And there were a few others. We started meeting in February 2021, and Nancy had some documents from Rufus Bratton. And she said, does anybody want to come and see them? I think within a couple of weeks, I was at Nancy's house. And I said, yes, I want to see them. She brings out this box. I may have had a picture of the box. Okay, back up. Yes. So she brings out the box, and we're going through some of Rufus Bratton's documents. And then we start talking about DNA. We lift each other up, and there I am. So, yes, next slide, please. So every year at Historic Brattonsville, we have 3 big events that focus on African American history. The first that I want to talk about is By the Sweat of Our Brow. It's every second Saturday in September. Very easy to remember. SSS, second Saturday in September. And it's called By the Sweat of Our Brow, and we honor the legacy and history of the African Americans who were enslaved on the plantation. We also do programming every Saturday in February. February is our Black History Month. I understand yours is different, but we have, February is our Black History Month. So every Saturday in February, we do extra programming for Black History Month. And then we recently, maybe 2-3 years ago, Juneteenth was enacted as a federal holiday in the United States. Let's hope it stays that way. And so we do extra programming on Juneteenth at Historic Brattonsville. So hopefully you can make it one of those times and join us there. Next slide, please. So we started with Joseph McGill, who I understand was here a few days ago. He came to Brattonsville in 2006 or 7. And we were one of the first plantations that he spent the night at. Joseph McGill spends the night in places where enslaved people have slept to bring about awareness about the importance of saving these places. And so he came to Brattonsville. There were 4 of us who stayed the night at Brattonsville that night. And so since then, I've been staying the night with anyone who wants to stay. Bratton and I have stayed together. I think Sarah has stayed. Angela has stayed. So anytime somebody wants to stay, and we usually do it the night before By the Sweat of Our Brow. And so that's another part of what we're doing. So there are so many layers to this story. I really need about another 10 hours. I won't take it. I'm about to sit down. But I've actually been going all over the world talking about Historic Brattonsville because people are very interested in this story. I think I've been to Sweden.
Austria.
Where?
Austria.
Thank you, Austria. Berlin. I'm going to Kyrgyzstan, October the 8th, next week, talking about Historic Brattonsville. And people are so interested in the story that they somehow pay my way there. So I'll be there. But it really isn't. There's a lot of layers to this. There's a lot more to it that I wish we could get into. But I'm really glad that you're interested. Next slide. Thank you very much, so much. I appreciate you all, and I'll turn it over to Chip.
Thank you, Lisa. I did a lot of talking and walking and sweating today, so I'm going to rely on notes to help me around tonight. It's nice to be here. It's really tough keeping up with these Southerners. They got lots of energy. And they brought this awful hot weather. Anyway, we've come a long way to be here in this place, a very long way. Several years ago, my friend Joe O'Neill told me the story about the Southerners who found refuge after the Civil War here in London. A number of months ago, Bratton Holmes reached out to me and told me the story of Brattonsville and the Bratton Descendants, who are a great bunch of folks who share not only some genes, but a love of history and family. He was most interested in London and what might be here to help him understand the flight, abduction, and life of J. Rufus Bratton in Canada. I was familiar with the story because of my recent book, copies available later, that recounts the international incident in which Rufus Bratton was the central figure. I assured him there was plenty to see, and we stayed in touch. Before I knew it, there were others who had joined the discussion and were having Zoom meetings. We were having Zoom meetings courtesy of Carl Cadogan, chair of the London Black Heritage Council. Our numbers were soon swelled by James Stewart Rainey, president of the London and Middlesex Historical Society, Professor Lisa Bratton, and other Bratton descendants and Londoners, as well as talented event organizer Candace Haynes, along with Western University film students bringing their talents and enthusiasm. As you will know by now, London and Ontario welcomed many people from south of the border, both before, during, and after the Civil War. Before the war, we welcomed free black people and those who had escaped enslavement by traveling along the Underground Railroad to freedom. Early black settlements were established north of London and in border communities like Windsor and Niagara. The black farming communities of Buxton and Dawn down near Chatham were very successful, and at one point, fully 1/3 of the population of Chatham consisted of black residents. I guess we should have put a slide up. Can you put the first one? During this visit to London, we visited the Meeting Tree, a landmark and gathering spot for newcomers anxious to start a new life of freedom under the British flag, and the African Methodist Episcopal Church, another important place of gathering, built in 1849 and now residing at Fanshawe Pioneer Village. During the Civil War, London, a city of about 15,000 more or less, was full of buyers for the armies of both sides, looking for horses, foodstuffs, and other supplies. Skedaddlers, or draft dodgers, found jobs here. Spies for both sides worked the streets and came up with plans, some of which worked, others which failed. In fact, the plot to kill Abraham Lincoln was hatched at a hotel in Montreal that catered to Southerners, so much so they served mint juleps. After the war, many black migrants returned home, lured by family and the promises of Reconstruction. But they would be disappointed with the enactment of Jim Crow laws and the rise of the Ku Klux organization, determined to keep black men from voting. Not long after the war, the once comfortable Southern whites fled north, their plantations, enslaved staff, and way of life gone. The Mazicks and Manigals of the Charleston area found refuge in London by 1869, as early as 1866 for the Mazicks. They apparently persuaded Rufus Bratton to join them in 1872. And after a rocky start, Bratton brought his family and enjoyed life in London until 1879, when he and his family returned to the south. We visited his home on Piccadilly Street. The Mazicks and Manigals remained here, however, and we visited their final resting places in Woodland Cemetery. So there we are. Many of you folks have traveled a very long distance and witnessed the differences in this part of the world compared to yours. But imagine the difficulties of your ancestor traveling nearly 1,000 miles by rail to a new land that was so foreign and British. I'm talking about Bratton here. And how he must have reacted to his acceptance by Londoners. Not to mention how he handled the cold and the large amount of snow for which London is famous. In the wintertime only. At least he didn't face all the road construction you folks have encountered in a city that's nearly 500,000 in population. Our shared journey has been truly wonderful and interesting, and so much easier than for your ancestors and his and their acquaintances. And I was heartened by I got a little wet-eyed. The reaction that you folks had around the meeting tree today was just absolutely astounding. I think it was maybe been one of the highlights of the visit for you, but to me that was really
Heartwarming.
Heartwarming, thank you, Carl. I can't walk in time. Anyway, I hope we have been as welcoming to you as our predecessors were to yours. And for me, this has been a very special event, and I want to thank you for including me in your journey of discovery.
So I'm Sarah. I'm one of the descendants of Brattonsville, so happy to be here in Canada. And we've had a busy 2 days, emotional 2 days. And my job is to provide some closing remarks, but then we're going to have a panel presentation and some Q&A, so we're not done yet. So we've joined up here in Canada and with our newly found friends. And we've been gathering together in Zoom, virtually, and in person. We've gone from, Durham to Charleston to Charlotte to Atlanta to Boston to Austria, and returned to gather together at our historic ancestral home in Brattonsville at McConnell, South Carolina, where the plantation of our ancestors lived and still exists as a historic site, as Lisa was showing you. And we joined together as descendants of those who were enslaved and those who were enslavers, with a mindful and deliberate purpose to remember our history with as honest a reflection as is possible. Maya Angelou said, "History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again." And we try to put into practice Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners sitting down together at the table of brotherhood. Our past is a story of violence and trauma, also a story of resilience. Our current story is hopefully a power of hope and healing that can occur when people come together in honest reflection and with an open heart and mind. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." He also said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." But remember, that takes all of us working together to bend the arc in that direction. There are those working now who would have us erase parts of our history and avoid telling the difficult or ugly parts of our history. But in doing so, that would not only erase the truth, but we would also be unable to tell the story of how we can reshape and change after trauma. We would be unable to tell the story of the power of resistance and resilience of those who endure, heal, survive, and thrive. I'll end with another quote that was taken from the Bible, which seems fitting since we're here in a house of worship. Former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright had this quote placed on her desk. She placed it pointing in her direction rather than outward so she could see it. Madeleine Albright was the granddaughter of Jewish grandparents, 3 of 4 of whom were murdered in the Holocaust. She was not raised with this knowledge, however. Her parents converted to Catholicism to avoid anti-Semitic persecution and never told their children of their Jewish heritage. She learned it at a later age, as an adult at the age of 59. Of Jewish heritage, raised Catholic as a child, she married an Episcopalian and became a lifelong, devoted member of an Episcopalian church. Madeleine Albright did not know of her true heritage. Due to anti-Semitism, this truth was hidden from her. She nonetheless was able to persevere and found her own direction. The quote she had on her desk is from the book of Micah, chapter 6, verse 8, and reads as follows. "The Lord has shown you what is good, and what in turn does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." Thank you. I think we're going to Renee.
I'm supposed to get here closing with my cousin. I'm just going to tell a short story of something recently that occurred to me. And being on this journey here in London and enjoying the history in the last couple of days and matching that history with ours in America, I found this to be the most fitting thing that happened to me very recently. I have a vacation home in St. Simon's Island. There, I put a lot of pickleball there, and I was there a couple weeks ago. There's a huge backstory that I do not have time to say. However, there's a wealthy white male who's there. He and I play pickleball a lot there together. At some point, we sat down on the bench after we played, and after a long conversation about many things, And his father owned the first bank on that island. And we were discussing these things. At some point, at the end of our conversation, he said to me, well, come on, Linda, you know, you're highly educated, you're a judge, so don't you think being that education is actually the great equalizer for all of us? And immediately it struck me, but the most important thing about how it struck me is that the thought that I had never entered my mind until that moment. And in that moment, I looked at Dave and I said, Dave, I said, no, it's not. And he said, well, why would you say that? Because education is a great equalizer. I said, because let me tell you my experience. I said, I was born in California out west, 58. I lived there in the 60s. I didn't have any Jim Crow laws that caused me to believe there was nothing I could do. I said, however, in the South, where my cousins who were equally educated, they grew up under the Jim Crow laws. And they were always told, you can't cross that street, you can't go in that neighborhood, you can't go to that park, you can't do this, and you can't do that. They were lawyers and they were judges. So when I came as an adult, and I'm talking to my equally highly educated cousins, I looked at him and I said, because they grew up that way, I was the one who always crossed the street. I was the one who went the furthest, simply because I was not stopped by words as a child saying you can't do this and you can't do that. I didn't have a grandmother in the South whose father was born a slave, who she would say to her grandchildren, which are my first cousins, who are judges and lawyers, can't do that, can't go to that theater, you can't go downstairs in that theater, you can't do this. And I say that to say, education is wonderful, but if you grew up in the Jim Crow South, and I don't care how highly educated you were, that years and years and generations of being told what you can't do, it also stifles you, even as a professional, highly educated individual. So when I explained that to Dave, Dave really looked at me and took a breath and nodded his head and just shook it. Because for the first time, Dave understood something different. Thank you.
So we're just going to have some of the Descendants come up here. Well, who else was going to join us? I don't know who any of the London folks were. Candace isn't here, so we've got to figure this out ourselves.
No, we're hopeless.
We'll get this worked out. So officially, I've been designated the moderator of this. I don't know why, but that's fine. But Ultimately, we've done this a few times where we've had Descendants. We've primarily done this at Brattonsville, but we've had a couple of times where we've been at other venues. We were at a historical conference in Charlotte where we had 6 of us, I believe. And what we realized is we can get up here and talk all we want, and we might not necessarily hit the topics that people are actually curious about. So, we can, I mean, obviously, if anybody wants to throw in, go ahead and go into storytelling mode about anything that we want to mention, you could do that. Audience, if you have any questions, you're welcome to just go ahead and throw them out, and we will hand it around.
I think we're going to start with your students.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. Okay. That's what I forgot in the process.
Is it okay? Good. Hi, my name is Emmanuel.
And my name is Beth.
And we're students with Western University. We've been working with the Descendants of Brattonsville project alongside our classmates and Professor Gregory DeSouza and Professor Janelle Blankenship to film as well their site visits in London.
Before we open up questions for the audience, we wanted to ask one question each to the presenters today.
So the first question I have here is, what key takeaway or central lesson do you want students and young people in London to learn from this history?
I guess the first thing I hope you all take this away is that better is possible. That you can come out of a confused, dark past and find this beautiful space that you're sharing. I'm talking about our friends, the Descendants here. I hope that comes out. And the other, I didn't allude to this in my talk, but given what's happening between Canada and the United States at the national, nation versus nation level, I think we as Canadians, it's incumbent on us to remember the great relationship we do have with countless millions and millions of Americans, and we've seen that exemplified. The love and inspiration across the border is there, and it is real, whatever else is dominating the headline.
So the next question is, what is the most effective way for an average London resident who may not have a direct historical connection to get involved and support these heritage efforts?
I guess what I would say is can you hear me? Yes. Is it on? No. Maybe not. Is that better? Okay, what was the question again?
The question is, what is the most effective way for an average London resident who may not have a direct historical connection to get involved and support these heritage efforts?
I think history is not taught well. I think that those historians always talk about what got them interested in history. For me, part of it is just trying to understand your community, reading, actually doing a bit of research on your city. I've lived in 4 cities in Canada, and I always try to learn a bit about the city, more than sort of top level, but I try to dig a little bit deeper so I understand more about the city, and that was sort of my interest. I was interested in the history of Ottawa, history of Edmonton, the history of Toronto, And then when I came to London, the history of London, one of the very first things I got involved in London was the London Black History Coordinating Committee, because I wanted to learn a bit about the history of the city that I lived in. And it doesn't take a lot to do that. We have a great library system in this city, and it's probably underused. I think just making a little bit of effort and talking to people, maybe older people, finding something about the history that tweaks your interest. So for me, when I was growing up in Ottawa, a lot of it was around sports, learning about the history through sports. Might be something else. So that's my
question here. I really believe how this really becomes more part of educating people is really through the school curriculum, through our educators, through school boards, and looking at our history and what is our history.
I think it has to really start at that level. Grade 1, grade 2, whatever it is. And when I went to school, we memorized dates of battles and UK history and American history as well, but really didn't drill down beyond that. My personal belief, that's where it's going to start. Where are the educators with all of this? And I don't really see it in the school curriculum, in the books in the library, and things of that nature. So I really believe that we have to start educating the educators.
Thank you. I see Tom Peace here, and he is from Huron, and he can speak to education, that education aspect. But what I would say, agree with what you have to say, Norm, is that history has always, I think they teach history in grades 7 and 8, and in grade 10, it might be an option. You could take it or not take it. So if you're not interested, no one pushes you, and there's something else, phys ed is a subject. So you can take phys ed rather than history. So I think you're right, but I think there has to be more that helps students make the choice about learning about their own history.
And how do we do that?
Well, we have a couple of young people with their hands, so perhaps you can.
I was just going to say that you do have to do one high school history, at least one.
Okay.
I mean, we should have one.
Okay. Thank you for correcting me.
I just want to say it was a pleasure to meet you all yesterday. And I know we had a short time together, but being with you in the chapel space at the village, as a researcher, it's been a privilege to learn and connect, this history. As I mentioned yesterday too, and I'll put it as a question, is I believe there's this misconception that history has to be, there's Black American history and Black Canadian history. But when you think about it, at the end of the day, it's a history for an entire community of people that have historically experienced, violence and oppression. So what are the ways in which that us as students and young people in our cities and communities, how can we approach the notion of bridging this gap to further share those stories, because they do intersect and connect?
For what it's worth, in the U.S., we have to take 3 high school history credits, and depending, the general procedure is 1 year of world history, 1 year of U.S. history, and 1 year of civics and economics sort of credit. And then some kids will do a fourth and some will not, kind of depending on their personal temperament. At least in the U.S., I work in a public school system. Lisa is a college history professor, so, and I can't comment on the college perspective, but for us, what I've noticed about the curriculum is it tends to be fairly compartmentalized, and which okay, especially at my level, it's the middle school level. They tend to say, all right, this month we're going to learn about Native American populations, and next month is Black History Month, so we will do that. And then the next month after that, we're going to be doing the Cold War. And it tends to be compartmentalized and not particularly interconnected. And if there's anything that should be interconnected, it's the study of history. So, don't know. I can't comment on the higher ed level if you want to.
So I'm at a what's called a historically black college or university. It's called HBCU, and that's why our student population undergrad level is 99% African American or of African descent, I should say. So I poll them I teach history. I teach 2 sections of global civilization, which is a core course that everyone has to take, 2 sections, and then I also teach African American history electives. And I polled them. I said, well, how many of you learned about, for example, Malcolm X, and what did you learn about him? And what I've noticed over the 13 years I've been at Tuskegee is that it was getting better. Because when I went to school, I went to a white school in Vallejo, California, where I'm from, like 300 white girls, me, and some nuns, okay? So, we learned seems like we learned every time someone sneezed during the World War II, we had to learn about that. Every date, and that's what we learned. So history wasn't all that interesting to me because it wasn't speaking to me. But just now when it's starting to I'm starting to feel, wow, these students are really getting more than I got. Then what happens, we get a different administration. And so now I just don't know where, nobody knows, it's something different every day. And so I don't know where it's going. I used to be very hopeful. Our museums, there's an attack on our museums as it relates to African American history. Trump's lawyers are supposed to know more than some of the best African American history professionals who put that museum together in Washington. So I used to be really hopeful, and now I'm not. And I really hate to say that, but that's my truth.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're asking also about what can you guys do. Is that correct? All right, so I'm going to give you a little background. When I was, I'm 60-something plus. Anyway, way back then, I recall that I got together, I was a cheerleader, then I got with the football team. And I said, hey, you guys, the football team, black and whites get together, they hang out, they're doing their thing. Cheerleaders, pretty much the same thing. But the rest of the school was basically, segregated. They segregated themselves. So I pulled together the team, and I remember our cafeteria was separated. And I said to the captains on the team, black football captain and a white captain, I said, guys, I need you guys to go, the black captain go on the white side, the white captain go on the black side. Let's mix these people up. And take the team, get your team, and the white guys go over where all the black kids are sitting, the black, go the opposite. What we did, once we did that for about a week, all that segregation ended because nobody knew where to sit. Everybody was like, we're the football team. Well, your best football guy may be over there this week, and it may be over there. There are little things that you guys can do on your campus that can make a huge difference. And it was the same thing. I remember pep rallies. All the blacks were on one side, all the whites were on one side. And just the gesture of, I remember pulling myself out, going on to one side because all the cheerleaders stood on the white side. And then, just going to the principal and going to advisors, this is not right. You got the black kids. So I said, let's mix all the cheerleaders up, spread everybody across, and then, typically the kids who want to sit in front of their favorite cheerleader, now they don't know where the favorite cheerleader is going to be. So now we integrated the pep rallies because we were spread out, so everybody started sitting with whomever. It's so many simple things like that. And that's a big thing to me because I had to really live it, and it was probably a lot more than what I'm just explaining, but it worked, is my point. And so these days, you guys have so much at your fingertips. You have all that social media contact. You have the ability to form groups. You're encouraged to do those things. Do those things and do them in a way that will integrate your world, your campus. Trust me, it's a simple process. Just get the people together. Thank you.
I've taught 5th grade for 30 years, and part of what we did was U.S. history, Civil War, Reconstruction, all the way up. And there are so many people who love U.S. history, who love Black history. And so if you reach out to, I know we came in through Detroit. So if you reach out to Detroit, some came through Buffalo, or just reach out, you will find plenty of teachers who are like, what? Somebody from Canada wants to talk to me because the slaves escaped to Canada? What? They will be so excited. And then you will be bombarded with emails of, okay, when you want to meet, when you want to Zoom, da 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 da. So if you just put that out there, you will find a lot of teachers who will be ready to grab a hold of this new resource. And then you'll be like, oh, okay, I got to turn some people down because I didn't know what can of worms I was opening up. But we get excited about history.
I think the other thing that is very interesting is also in this next generation, I feel like history was always taught to us to be boring, right? Like it was drawn out like, oh, I don't want to have to memorize dates. I don't want to have to, and so, but history can be very interesting. It's stories, right? Like everyone who doesn't love to sit and binge watch something on Netflix about somebody's story. And if you think about all of the television series or whatever we watch, all they really are is a transcript of somebody's story, whether it's fictional or it's nonfiction, right? And they're just making those stories something that people want to listen to and grab onto and people want to talk about and like, oh, this is so intriguing and that. So everybody's life is just as interesting and intriguing. So we just have to make sure that we make history something that is worthy of binge watching on Netflix, essentially. And so teaching your kids that history isn't just these dates and books that you have to read, but making it something that they want to like grab a hold of and tell other people about and like, oh my goodness, this is what else I just figured out about who I am and stuff like that. So I think it really is going to have to start with changing a mindset and reframing what we think of as history. And the second aspect is, because all history is nothing but somebody else's story, go to like older homes, go talk to people about the journeys that they've had before it's too late to know those histories. And like listen to other people's stories, find intriguing stories that they have, find the stuff that they, that they did when they were in high school, like Linda's story of getting people to go to other sides and hearing all of those different things, and then start telling them to people like, oh my goodness, I met with this person. Don't let those people's stories die with them. Let their stories live on through your telling of them, whether it's your own Netflix series or your YouTube channel, or as an influencer, create an influencer channel that's just talking about normal people's lives and normal people's histories so that everyone can realize just because you're from the United States or just because you're from Canada or you're from Kenya, there's nothing really different. Those stories are all the same on some level. There's something that's integral about them that is like, oh, I can relate to that. And so starting to make history relatable, tangible, and entertaining, I think is the best way that we can start moving things forward and making things more interesting and just getting into those things.
Amen. I guess I do have a follow-up to that too. We have teenagers, so that, yeah. And I've experienced how they are taught history versus how I was taught history. And my daughter specifically with U.S. history was every incident or item or thing about history that they were taught, it was integrated in terms of they were supposed to then argue if there was a race relation issue within that historic incident. Have we moved forward today, or have we moved backwards today, and you had to write why you thought so? that was kind of interesting. It was something that they did through the year. So it was sort of like taking that and making it relevant to today. Okay, well, what's happening today as well? So it was history, but also how does that influence what's happening today? Does it? And what's your opinion about what's happening today? So you're not siloing issues, you know, and making it a topic that is relevant to everybody.
I'm going to make this real quick. My daughter Candace, you guys have kind of heard her name popped around a few times. Yeah. At her high school, I just remember I'm sitting here, I remember what she did doing a history thing. She did a wax museum, I just remember. She got all her friends to dress up in these historical, you know, garbs and everything, and everybody had a little sign and they mimicked whatever they had to do. But the students had to go throughout the day, they had their, it's like 10 of them throughout the different parts of the school, and they had to find them. And so when you got all 10, or whatever you had to do, you had to put it in a box or something like that. And then when they drew, they got prizes or whatever. But she came up with that idea. And I remember years later, her teacher still telling me about, that was one of the best things we ever done for history, you know. So being creative like that too really works in schools.
I wanted to add too, with the attack on African American studies in our schools and in our country, what I'm working on now is, I met a lady in the gym actually, and she has a tutoring center. And so and she tutors math. And I said, well, what do you think about me coming there and doing free African American history courses? Love the idea. And so I'll be starting that sometime maybe around the first of the year once we get it together. And I just want to do it because of all the students that I know who are not getting that knowledge. So what you can do is start your own study groups. If you have children in your neighborhood, if you don't have a master's and PhD in African American studies, it's okay, because what you can do is get a book and everybody learn together. Or whatever the topic is that you're trying to learn, study groups inside your home, study groups inside your churches, and even study groups on Zoom. But there are other ways that you can educate yourself without even having a teacher. If you have a book, read the book, study, and learn together.
Thank you. I'm learning a lot here. So there's the practical aspect. Here in the city, we do organize a lot of activities, and most often it's just us. Like for example, during the Black History Month, there's usually we bring guest speakers from different parts of Canada. People will display their culture. There's usually an aspect of food and an aspect of learning. So you can do that. And then in the summer, we have different activities as well. And another way to really understand Black history is by joining and participating in those activities. Because most often it's just us. I have to say that. Thank you.
All right, I just want to ask that if there are any last words or remarks or any even points that you guys want to add to share with the audience or to address something that was shared today on the trip or about the project of the Descendants of Brattonsville as a whole.
Just for my last words, I'd like to make sure Michelle Jenkins is here, I think, and you wanted to say some things.
Michelle Jenkins, would you like to?
And those are my last words, Michelle Jenkins.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Jenkins. First of all, it's lovely to be back in this church. As a child, I was telling our family today, I call you guys family now. As I was with the family today, I sung in that corner with my mom twice and did a duet. So it's amazing to be back. So proud to be a Londoner. I've grown up all my life. But I think even more proud to be a descendant of someone who was absolutely amazing. So my grandfather would be James Francis Jenkins, We started at Dawn of Tomorrow, and his wife, Christina Housen. And then my uncle would be Barry Housen, and then my aunt would be Kay Livingston. So again, it's so, thank you, it's so important to keep talking. And I think we've all touched on it in a different manner or in a different sentence. The importance of let's keep talking. Even if it's uncomfortable, be it that way. But we have to keep having these discussions. Be it that of, yes, slavery, this is what happened, but look where we are now. And not to say, do you know what, when we talk about slavery, it's every white person is bad. No, we work together harmoniously. You brought up Fred Landon. He worked on a newspaper with my grandfather. So we have to dispel these myths, but we have to get uncomfortable to be comfortable at the same time. So again, a heartfelt thank you for making the trip. Thank you for letting me learn as an individual on my journey. And I just have a little something for all of you. I think Chip touched on it today when we went to the meeting tree, how beautiful it was. So when I found this bag with the leaf on it, I thought, hey, this could be a memorabilia of us at the meeting tree. And a little keychain to say, our home is your home. So thank you.
And you said, ooh, yeah, you're raising your hand. Because when, and we'll come to you as well, but I saw your face perk up just a second ago when you heard what she was saying.
Hello. First I wanted to say welcome to Canada. I hope you guys are having a good time so far. Kind of a comment that I wanted to make was it's pretty inspiring to see kind of two sides of, family that descend from the same person or have that kind of shared history with one another. And in a sense, you guys sitting here are kind of like a symbol of what reconciliation can look like. And, even from something like a history that can be very hard to address and talk about sometimes. And what I kind of wanted to ask was, this doesn't have to be, you guys specifically, but how can people, come together and, kind of do the same thing you guys are doing, as in the sense of like trying to bring reconciliation forward and have more people, in a sense, try to do the same thing.
Ask questions, and I think that was where it started off with us. Was we had meetings where we got to know each other, and people asked each other questions, and just to get backstory, to get to know each other, to find common ground.
When we got started, it was hard, and it was scary. I don't think it was necessarily scary for Lisa, because she's not scared of anything. But for many of us, it was, and luckily, as you mentioned, we started out with 2 moderators. And I'll never forget her first words. When she said, we have rules. And I'm not quoting the right way. We have rules. In these meetings, there is no hate, there is no guilt, there is no shame. And and then she was quiet. And once she did that, you were like, okay, I can breathe. And we have answered some very, very difficult questions. And I remember with Charnel in one of the first meetings saying, my great-grandparents were not allowed to read and write. We don't have your records. But we want to know our history. And we have to share that history. And you can't learn if you don't teach history. You can't forget it. And it's helped me get rid of a lot of guilt and shame. When you have your great-grandparents, you find out, or as a young adult, you come to the realization when you study history that, wow, my great-grandparents thought it was okay to own another human. That's a hard pill to swallow. It takes a while. But because of this group and all of us becoming not only friends, but we truly love each other. And we've worked through all that. And as I've said many times, you know, it's obvious we became cousins because one of my ancestors took advantage of one of your ancestors. I mean, that's the fact. We all know that. And whereas I am not at all proud of how we became cousins, I'm extremely proud to call them my cousin.
Thank you. That was a really excellent question. So I'll just say, from my perspective, as a person who kind of brought this together, that I am very culturally African American, very from my childhood to now, and some of my cousins are very culturally white, and it's just how it is. But we have been able to come together as a group, and the diversity is what makes it beautiful. So for me, I kind of live in an African American orbit, but now that I have additional family members that I consider my family members and that we've gotten very close, it has made me a better human being. And I've said that before, and I will say it again, that I will never excuse or forgive white people for enslavement. Never. That day's not coming. However, I can separate my relationship with my family from that horrible history. I can do that. And I have friends who say, I can't believe you talked to them, Lisa. Really? You talk to people who enslaved the descendants of people? I said, well, number one, they're my blood family. Number two, I can choose to ignore it, or I can choose to embrace it. And I've chosen to embrace it, and it's a beautiful relationship.
A little bit more first, hold on.
I just wanted to say there's lots of different ways you can engage in reconciliation work too. In addition to this family group, there are people who all over the South are engaging in reconciliation groups, non-related and related, in the southern U.S. And I live in Massachusetts, and in my church we're doing work with the Union League and the NAACP, exploring our church's history of the founders being enslavers and our responsibility for making repair and telling that history, and how to reach out to the Black community and how to make those connections. And so there's so many layers and different ways to reach out, make connections, and repair. It doesn't have to be just a mirror of this family. It can be so many different connections in the community that you can make, like what Linda was talking about, in a school, in a community, in a church, wherever you go.
My name is David Bratt. My family comes from Antrim in Northern Ireland.
So it's ours too.
I know. A lot of Brattons came from there, and you can't figure out where they went behind that. And my family came to Canada in the 1820s and settled in the Ottawa Valley. So I have seen Brattonsville as I go south because my son and my son's family live in Atlanta. and he's married to an American. And I really appreciate what you've done. Janae, my friend, pointed this out to me and got me the flyer, and I thought, well, I'll be curious if it comes. When you look at your own family, and I'm very interested in my family background, because I heard lots of stories when I was young. And my mother's family came from Nashville. And they go back 7, 8 generations to a man named Pleasant Martin, who was a member of George Washington's army in the Potomac, and was at the Battle of Yorktown when Wallace was defeated. So I have very deep American roots, and in fact, a couple of years ago, I applied, and I'm now a son of the American Revolution. Genealogy is one of these things in families you have to be very careful, because you might find stuff you didn't know. And it is tough to deal with. And when we talk about the South and someone in my family, 7 generations, you can imagine they were fairly well off, and you understand the reasons why. And I've never been able to talk with anybody about it. So it's pretty emotional to me to listen to you talk about that. That was the side of the family that I didn't know what to do with. The other side of the family is my wife's family, and they decided in 1783 that they'd been fed up with America, and they sailed in 4 ships to New Brunswick, Canada, in 1 week with 111 members of the family from around New York. There is in Canada, like the Daughters and Sons of the American Revolution, the United Empire Loyalists. During COVID, I worked very hard to document our family on both sides of my wife's family, and we secured the status for her of the United Empire Loyalists. Those are people who were loyal to King George III. You can imagine sometimes our dinner conversation between the American Revolution and the Loyalists. So, anyway, that's just a story. I wanted to thank you all very much. I came to London to school, left, came back again to get a pretty good job with an high-profile company here in London. And in about 1981, 1982, and Chip Martin will know this too, the story of Rufus Bratton came out. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I was proud of my name, and then this guy, and I'm hiding, because you know the Brattons in London, except this guy who was there. So I kind of looked into it, and I figured he wasn't a very good guy, but he was probably a good surgeon. But I got over that, and I actually found some other Brattons right here, mostly all from the Ottawa Valley. But as somebody, one of the panel members said earlier, the Brattons were pretty prolific, that they were. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to me.
David,
Have you had your DNA
DNA tested? Have you had your DNA tested through Ancestry.com?
I have.
Let's talk.
So just to give a little background of how you and us might be connected. So Rufus Bratton, who was the resident here, was my great-great-grandfather, your one great for you. His father was John Simpson Bratton Sr. His father was William Bratton, who was involved in the Revolutionary War, founded what is now Brattonsville. He was either born in County Antrim, Ireland, which you mentioned, or he was born in Pennsylvania after the family got over here. We don't really know which, not that it's really critical. So we would have to guess that we are related because maybe his father decided to leave to come to the U.S. and his father's brother decided to stay. That's where, and then in the 1820s, the descendants of that brother came to the Ottawa Valley. That would make us probably somewhere in the range of 8 cousins or something like that. I don't know, I'm ballparking it here, but it also means that we, have all that good Scotch-Irish blood and, all sorts of recessive diseases and everything.
I'm an amateur London historian, humbled by the historians that are here today. I just want to say I have learned so much today. This is such a meaningful, beautiful thing. When you said black women's bodies were not their own, I just wanted to break down and cry when you think about our history. I just want to add a little adjacent bit of something that I'm proud of as a Canadian. I don't know if you're aware, but September 28th was National Day for Truth and Reconciliation in Canada, federal holiday, because we have our own issues with residential schools that we are coming to terms with, and people are trying to come together. And the number of people, white people, that wore an orange shirt that day just made me so proud, with logos on that were appropriate, and I just wanted to, the thought of reconciliation is so important, and I'm glad that Canadians have our own little way of doing that as well. But thank you so much for coming today. It was very meaningful.
You don't need to be shy about what you ask, because you can be as blunt as you would like. Ooh, we have a question here.
I just have a quick question. You get along the lines of we give you as blunt as possible. I'm curious about these monthly Zoom calls that you have. And if they started in 2021 and have been going on every month, what do you talk about? I'm kind of curious what goes on those calls.
Yeah, sometimes it's like logistical stuff about Brattonsville and events we've got coming up and planning, which is not quite as interesting for you guys. Sometimes we're delving into more complicated stuff than that. Yeah.
So we partner with the staff at Brattonsville. It's a historic site, and one project that we have been working on, which just came to fruition this past February, was the cemetery project. So Brattonsville was opened as a historic site in the mid-70s, and there was a lot of emphasis on, here's this beautiful white house. I think you saw it with the big porch. There are brick slave cabins. One I remember in the early 80s was fashioned as, this was Dr. Bratton's medical office. It wasn't fashioned as a slave cabin, or the true story of it was not told. So Brattonsville and the staff have evolved into, I think, doing a better job of telling a more accurate story of the history of the place, right? There is a site that had been well known to the staff that was more recently known to me as a wooded area that had been used for many years through the history of the plantation as a burial site for the people that were enslaved on the plantation. And it had been grown up and not kept up and not fenced off, and it was just basically, if you looked at it from the roadside, it would look like it was just woods, basically. But if you walk in and start looking around, you start to see some depressions, and then you see white quartz stones laid at the top or foot of depressions, and then you realize that there are a lot of people that were laid to rest there. Brattonsville was able to get a grant and study the area and identify the number of what they think were grave sites by doing something called ground penetrating radar, and determine that there were a number of grave sites. They identified with definitive numbers that there were 481 sites.
At least.
Yeah. And that would be the amount that they could definitively. We worked with them to decide how to mark the grave sites without detracting from the site, and then opened it as an exhibit to the public. And I don't know if one of the other descendants wants to talk about the process of naming as well.
So we all came together and gave ideas of what we thought would be a good name for the burial ground. So we had parameters. There were certain words we weren't going to use. So we weren't going to use slave. And so in the process of coming together, and everybody gave their ideas, and then we voted, a name was chosen. So that we talked about that sometimes in our meetings. We might talk about, you've heard that there's a lot of travel that takes place. So everybody, we don't all go. So part of our meetings are, well, what did you do in Austria? What happened when you were in Charlotte? What would happen when you went on this particular trip? So of course, we meet every second Tuesday. So our October meeting will be about, well, what did y'all do in Canada? So those are some of the things we talk about.
I was just going to point out, there's a lot more online than just us. And there's quite a few online. And probably, I know sometimes, I just hear someone they'll just go on and on about, hey, I found this and I found that about my great-grandmother. And they'll just start sharing and sharing. And so it could just be something like that, just someone speaking for 30, 40 minutes talking about something they found in their attic or wherever they might have found something we're all be interested in.
So sometimes we have a moderator, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we talk about. Well, I want to talk to you, David. Really, I went to Ireland. Went to Ireland over the summer. Met with a genealogist in Belfast, and learned more about the white side of my family there. So we'll talk about that. Sometimes we're planning what we're going to do. But we almost I don't think we've ever run out of topics to talk about, to answer your question, because there is always something, and then it gets to be around 8:30, it's like, okay, trying to keep to the time, and then sometimes we go over, but it's all love, and sometimes we even just talk about our journey, how people are feeling, kind of do a check-in and see how people were feeling. We have found recently that everybody doesn't take to this as well as everyone else. Okay, so we had an issue with a person who really just was not able to emotionally handle all of this. And, so we talk about that. We talk about if you're experiencing difficulty with this. It's not easy for everybody. And I've had to say to myself, Lisa, everybody doesn't do this. You do this every day, but everybody doesn't do this. And I've had to rein myself in a little bit. Okay, not much, but they're good. They understand it. That's just how Lisa is. That's just how she communicates. But it's really been so positive. I really can't stress to you how positive this experience has been over almost 5 years.
If somebody gets off early, we may just talk about them because they got off early.
Other questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi. I just wanted to say thank you all for really telling such an inspiring story about this family and the kind of efforts you've made to be honest about your histories and how complicated their interwoven nature is. I wanted to actually ask about the relationship between the Brattonsville historical site and your family. So, what is that? It seems as though at one point the plantation site wasn't willing to put the two sides in contact with each other. I think Lisa was talking about that. And I'm wondering if the Brattonsville location now has a historical society that runs the plantation site as a historical site. Have they changed how they tell the story of that space because of your story?
Sure. The reason that the Brattonsville group changed their time was because Lisa is so persistent that she wouldn't give up, and therefore she talked me into it.
In the 1970s, when Brattonsville was first established as a site, it was very, they didn't tell the story of black people, very, very rarely. They didn't tell the story of Jim Williams, who was lynched on the plantation. In my experience, before I started working there, and volunteering there as much and working with them, I raised my hand during a tour, and I said, well, I understand someone was lynched here. Can you tell me about Jim Williams? They said, oh, we'll talk about that after the tour. And then then the tour guide pulled me aside and told me the story. All right, fast forward to 2022 maybe, there is now a marker up that will tell you the entire story of Jim Williams, and nobody is hiding it anymore. So that has really been a positive experience as it relates to Brattonsville, that we're now telling the story so much better. And they also consult us about events that they're having, particularly if they are about African American events. They will come to the African American Descendants and talk to us about, well, what do you think? And we have a lot of input on that as well. So it's been, it hasn't always been that way, but it is now. And I am pretty vocal. Okay, that's a big surprise. But I mean, this is my passion. This is my life. I am my ancestors' wildest dream. If you had asked Green and Melinda Bratton in 1865, let's say the day they got free, and if you had asked them, what do you want what is the best life you could hope for your great-great-granddaughters, two of us, and Angela and Charnel, what's the best life you could have hoped for them? They couldn't have come up with this. They could not have come up with this. They could not have come up with my life, with our education. They could not have come up with it. I am their wildest dream, and Brattonsville was so much a part of my life. I don't know how to not be involved with Brattonsville. I don't know. I don't know how not to be involved with Brattonsville. It is such a part of my life, and I'm so
by the actions of James Bratton. And this is like a two-part question, so I was also wondering, thank you. Sorry, the second part of my question was I was wondering when James Bratton was he went back to the United States. I was wondering if he faced prosecution.
Nope.
Okay.
So the explanation of that is he came to London to avoid prosecution for having lynched Jim Williams in 1871. That occurred in, was it March 1871? March of 1870. Yeah. He showed up here living under an assumed name, and he went by the last name Simpson, which was his father's middle name. So he was eventually arrested, abducted, call it what you will, was it Waterloo or Wellington? Wellington. Near a boarding house where he lived. He was then taken back to the United States, but then it was discovered that the arrest warrant was actually not for him. It was for another man named James Avery, who was also involved in the lynching of Jim Williams in South Carolina. He apparently had already left London and moved to Niagara by this time. So somehow he was brought across the border under these pretenses, and this was, as Chip will tell you, or you can read his book and find out about it there, there's your plug, a test of Canadian sovereignty. The Canadian government demanded that he be sent back because he had been arrested without a proper warrant and then extradited without without due process. So he came back up here. When he came back up here, well, everybody at that point, there was no point in having an assumed name anymore. So he then lived in full view of everybody in London for about 6 or 7 years with his family, and then he came back to the United States. The big event in the U.S. was 1876. The presidential election of 1876 was one of the nastiest in all of U.S. history, and I'm including recent ones in that. That one may have been the worst ever. And basically, the long story short is 1876, that election ended Reconstruction. So at that point, and even prior to that, the Grant administration had stopped prosecuting Klansmen for their activities. The reason was, at that point, they had gotten convictions of about 40 or 50 people for Klan-related activities, but they still had 1,100 cases to go, and they were using up the entire federal judiciary to try to deal with it. So basically, they just couldn't deal. The political will to prosecute people for their Klan activities just dried up, and at that point, the Klansmen were given clemency, so they were allowed to return to South Carolina or whatever place they were from without any fear of being prosecuted. So the answer is no. He never once faced any jail time for what he had done.
But the person that took him to the U.S. was charged in Canada and went to jail.
3 years.
3 years.
For kidnapping.
For kidnapping.
Yeah.
And his name was, help me out.
His name was Cornwall, was his last name.
Cornwall,
And he was
right.
an employee of the court office, and he was shown some paperwork by an American marshal and said, oh, this is good enough, we'll help you abduct him.
But the other side of that is, besides just the landmark that they have on the outside, Brattonsville then decided to change up one of the houses and made it a museum that was for James Williams and told his story about how he was a militiaman, how he ended up leading the black militia there. And it wasn't supposed to be just a black militia, but nobody else wanted, none of the white people wanted to be in the militia with black men, so it ended up being just a black militia and his leadership. And so they have his whole story. They have pictures of him, and they have guns that they used at the time. So it's a whole museum exhibit that's based on his story and what happened there. And the store that many of the buildings had multiple purposes. So they've redone the store to reflect his story, because his autopsy was done at Brattonsville in the corner store. So they redid that store so that it's no longer a home front, but the store so that it can be a symbol of when he was done, where his autopsy was. So yes, I think Brattonsville has started changing the story. It's not just, oh, I'll tell you on the side. It's up and it's ready. Anyone can read it. It's public knowledge and it's part of the tour, and they'll tell you about the story there. So it did change quite a bit from that. So his story, his family came out when they opened the exhibit. I think conversations did start happening. So the James Williams story is no longer a hush-hush. It is now a big part of the community.
The descendants of Jen Williams also join us often on Zoom as descendants of Brattonsville as well. None of them did come on this trip, however. So they are involved in our descendants group.
Candace is very clear about when we should wrap up, and I don't want to go over her schedule. Are there any sort of final questions or comments? I want to pass it on to Braddon, but I also want to do two things, I guess. I want to thank Pastor Philip Mundy for allowing us to use this space. Thank you for that. I brought him a gift. This is a painting that was done by a young London artist, and it was done a number of years ago for the London Black History Coordinating Committee when we were involved in the move of the chapel. This is women off to church, And I'd like to present this to you because you've done such a great job.